Hi guys, this will be video 17 for the how to design build a 58 Explorer replica and or any custom guitar for that matter now that we're this far along. And what I'm going to do in this video, I'm going to cover a lot of ground. I'm going to be pausing quite a bit, and hopefully by the time this video ends, I will have completely sanded all the pearl flush with the with the rosewood and got a really nice platform. And then I'm going to go ahead and spend a little bit of time talking about how you taper your fretboard. And then if there's time, according to how long-winded I get, we'll actually glue some binding on. And there might be an incredible amount of work that gets accomplished in this video, but only if I do a lot of pausing and like work for like 25 or 30 minutes doing certain parts of the job. But anyway, it'll be a good video. And this pearl is about 99% finished, if not even closer, other than it hasn't been polished yet. And that took about 45 minutes just working very slowly and kind of figuring out which file I want to use or where I could use sandpaper and stuff like that. So let me get a drink of water. It's really cold in the basement. I didn't realize my voice was kind of going to be a little bit scratchy. So let me pause, get a drink of water, and then I'll be back and we'll go from there. Okay, you'll have to zoom in to see what I'm talking about here, but this is something that I failed to cover in the last video, where I was talking about doing the whole layout and actually marking and or cutting for the pearl. I failed to clarify that you need to have some sort of support out here. And if you have a 3/4 inch thick piece of poplar from your big box store and your Stewart McDonald fretboard, I think it's just ever so slightly under 1/4 of an inch. And then if you go to like your Hobby Lobby and get a thin, clear ruler, and then go to your big box hardware store, and this is a, oh god, I never can think what they call it, the gauge. It's a gauge where you set the blade, angle gauge. It just so happens that that thickness is perfect, and it is perfectly true and square, that once you put your square atop that, your square is perfectly true and flat and very, very manageable, and nothing's bulky. And just like with machining the fret slots, you're able to keep a nice grip on everything. And even once you go to put your pearl in, you're able to hold your tool and this as you come down here. And once I know that I've got that pearl exactly where I want it, I go ahead and do just a real fine pencil mark around it. And if anything, that's just to let me know that's my absolute maximum area that I need to be cutting out. But while that pearl is actually laying up there, I'm holding it with my thumb. I go ahead and score with my X-Acto knife very gently. You have to score it, but don't try to start cutting just yet. But then out here on these edges, you just kind of want to do a little puncture, perforation. Because if you start trying to cut out here on this angle, you forget it, it's not going to work. What's going to happen, your blade is going to fall into one of the grains, and it's just going to pull the pearl off. No matter how good you are at holding it steady, your blade is going to find the grain in the wood, and it's going to push it off. So at this point, all you want to do is just do the perforation along the angle sides. And then up here, if you cut that right there, you're probably going to be just a little bit low. So you're actually going to be easing that up just ever so small amount and then scoring across that top. But it really helps if you make some identifying marks wherever this comes down and stops in this corner right here. Make sure you carry a pencil line straight across, straight down from that corner. That way, if you move your blade down, you know where to stop when you're doing your X-Acto work, like you'll you just pull about halfway across this way, and then come over and catch this side and pull about 3/4 of the way back. Cut, cut, cut. Don't try to cut the whole thing because eventually you're going to slip. And if you slip on a pre-finished fretboard, uh, you can fix it, but it's going to take a lot of work. Moistening the wood, scoring some artificial grain and crap like that, and sometimes they don't come out. So be real careful. And that's what I meant by when you're working with a finished fretboard, it changes everything. You have absolutely no room for error at all. But it is nice because since that is your finished fretboard, you know that whatever you see is what you're going to get. If you had an S4S or a flat board and you installed this pearl and maybe you did some real sloppy work around that perimeter, it might be pretty on the top, but then once you machine it radius, you might find a gaping gap down there. So, but even if you do, it's no big deal because you're able to mix the putty to the color of your fretboard that you're working with, whether it's ebony, which would be black, or if it's rosewood. You've already seen I mixed up the dark walnut trans tint. Didn't add any black to that at all, and you can see how beautiful and black it is. And you might think, oh my God, man, is that how bad the joints were? No, that's just where all of the 99% of the epoxy just spilled over, and that's just the way it works. It's impossible to only fill in just the area that you're working with. Other than you could have just put the rosewood dust in there and then hit it with the CA glue, the extreme thin CA glue, but it's a little bit dangerous because just the smallest drop of this just floods into the grain. And I didn't want to risk that on this particular wood because I've never worked with the Madagascar rosewood. I didn't want to run the risk of it having blotchy spots all around where the pearl were. It might have been okay and it would have been a little bit easier, but you're going to see that once I come in here with a pretty coarse file, I'm going to be able to clean each of these pearl up quite easily. And it's actually harder to do one at a time than it is to just like focus on doing these three and then maybe these three or something like that. Or either because you want to make certain that you don't scratch your fretboard. And the whole idea about every bit of this work, everything that you do, absolutely everything that you do must be perfectly linear, with the center line. No cross scraping at all. None of this, no matter how tempting it is, none of this crap at all. Now, you might see me put the blade, well, you will. You will see me put the blade up here on an angle, but I'll be cutting in a linear fashion. Okay, this is just basic file work, hand work, and anyone who's ever done any sort of mill work at all with a file, that's all we're doing. And just keeping in mind that we're trying to make certain that we don't have any really excessive scarring in the pearl in the middle, especially that cat right there, the one that I got almost perfectly flush. Got to be very careful to protect that center right there on that one. Quite frankly, all of them, but these are a little high enough that it's not going to hurt to come across them and scratch them a little bit. And I'm actually going to do that in camera if I'll stop talking, but I just thought that was some really incredible information right there because that's why I kept canceling those I did 2 videos, canceled both of them after like 30 minutes because I could not get to the point. And even in video 16, I never got to the damn point of like, you got to have some sort of support there in order to do this by hand with very, very basic hand tools and guarantee that your eye-to-hand coordination is not hindered by anything in your way. But everything is controlled so that you don't run the risk of, you're sitting here trying to keep that steady and then you slip and the blade goes off on a crazy angle and you lose your fretboard or you have a permanent scar there. So by having that support, regardless, I just, those dimensions right there happen to work out perfectly. And when I say perfect, just absolutely perfectly. And then everything you're doing is just make certain that you're scoring very much clean and straight down. Okay, and then even if you get off just a little, and I mean just a small amount, the putty's going to make you look like a real pro. Now, what of this piece of pearl right here is putty and what is actually wood? There's just a little bit of putty on this end, and there's just a little bit on this bottom corner here, and there was a very faint amount across the bottom line, but there's no putty on this top line, because after the guitar is built, you're looking at the guitar in its entirety. Excuse me. And you know, you've oiled the fretboard, the frets are in, the strings are on. But even if someone did put it under a mic, let's go ahead and do it, and I'll try to very quickly move forward to doing the actual work. But then you want to make certain that once you truly scrutinize your work, if you have a client that's really going to be pulling out the magnifying glass, you want them to be peering under that magnifying glass and go, wow, that's really cool. Or they might even see, oh, cool, I see the putty on each end, but then they see a beautiful straight parallel line between each fret and each side of each pearl. These 3, 4 down here are the ones that get most visually critical, but if your client is really looking for it, they'll find one that's off. And I think the one that I showed in the video is just barely visibly low, but you have to really be looking for it. And I think it's this one right here. When I say low, a little bit closer to this fret than it is this, but is it acceptable? Absolutely. I mean, it's so visually close that even if you're kind of scrutinizing it, you'll see that it's still perfectly parallel. And I'll try to really throw that one under the bus here in a moment, and we'll do some heavy scrutiny on that. But all the rest of them are absolutely really beautiful and perfect. And you know, and if you would make the determination as to whether you're going to continue to work with it based on where it hit. But when I was working, I remember thinking that's close enough for rock and roll. It really is. And I'm going to stop talking about that because it sounds like I'm worried that was going to be a problem. It's not, and I shouldn't have even brought it up. But don't get discouraged and shelve your job just because one pearl might have gotten just a little bit low. Because after you get the guitar built, you're just looking at the beauty of the whole guitar and the center line of everything. Okay. So let me get stuff off the table so I don't keep talking about it. I don't think I'll need that. Okay. It's called witness marks. When you are getting ready to do work on a particular item, but you're working around a very critical area that you don't want it to risk scoring, you make what's called witness marks. And you don't ever want to see those disappear. Or not anytime soon. You might see them fade a little bit, but if that's the case, it will witness to you what it is you're doing wrong, or that you might be a little bit heavy-handed in a certain direction. So keep some witness marks up there, and then and just know that in the middle, all these pearl are just a little bit high, so there's not going to be any problem with letting the file. We'll do some more witness marks later. I'm probably just going to do these 3. Let me just start doing the job. And I'll probably just focus on these 3 right here all at once, and with very minimal work in the middle, except for that one. That was a little bit high. I should have gotten that one just a little bit lower. But as you remember, when I was marking on the sides, man, there was like 80% of the thickness of the pearl was still remaining, so perfectly okay. I haven't used this one yet. I'm going to try it just a little bit. This is the file that I use. These are crosscut files, and obviously this is a flat. I like the small ones because you're guaranteed that they're actually uh, very much perfectly flat. Your big files, you have to be careful, especially if you inherited like your grandpa's files from where he used to work on his tractors or something. These things will bend, and I think this one is actually bent. Because my dad was a welding instructor at the local vocational school, and he was always in the backyard, like building trailers and working on cranes and dump trucks and loaders and stuff like that. So dad was, if there's anybody that could wear out a tool, it was Dad. Man, he was hard on his tools and stuff. But I think this was mine right here, but I'm almost certain this was Dad's. But this might be one that he lost and never got to work because it's in really good shape. So otherwise, if he'd have found it, he would have worn it out. So let's start with this one and stay very much linear, and I'll do the best I can to keep this on the camera. Let me see if I can work. Okay, what I'm going to do, I'm going to take the quick grip and I'm going to pin it to the table here. And I'm just going to do the best I can to keep my hands out of the way, but I'm not strict with that order. Okay. It's going to be your best tool, your favorite tool right there is a little small wire brush, and then eventually you're going to want to get a bronze brush, and I lost my bronze brush, so I get a bronze brush, but keep that clean, and don't wipe with any sort of chemical at all. Never. Don't wipe with any chemical. Don't be tempted to do anything. Let me show you what we've already been revealed. Okay, we've already been revealed that pearl was a little bit high on the bottom here, so it's cutting some of the pearl off right there, but we haven't touched the pearl right here. But we know that our pearl is above the fretboard, so we're not running the risk of screwing anything up. And should be a great job. So I'll just keep doing my job, and you can see how quickly the epoxy, the tinted epoxy, the dark walnut, is already just so almost perfect with the Madagascar Master Level Rosewood fingerboard from Stuart McDonald. Oh, forgot to pin that. I think that's on the camera. Yeah, it should be good. I'll go ahead and do all four. So 1, 2, 3, 4. These four right here. Okay, it's looking good. Still see my witness marks there. If it looks like they disappear, the only reason they would disappear right now is if some of the dust from the pearl is acting like like a grout, in a tile. If the dust in the pearl might be acting like a little bit of a grout there, that might cause some of the witness marks to fade. But I know the file is not making contact with the fretboard. And also, if you were making contact with the fretboard, you're going to see that rosewood dust, and it's going to be real light tan. So if you start seeing light tan dust show up, boom, that's when you need to pause and assess where you are and what you need to do. And the good thing about not having wiped this with any sort of like mineral spirits or even water, you won't want to start washing that with water because any debris and dust that you sand will now start gumming up in your file. As long as you keep everything very dry, then you'll be able to very easily clean your tool. Having difficulty keeping my witness mark, so just feel of it and see. I mean, it's obvious the pearl are still high. They got a long way to go. But let me check the time. All right, 21 minutes. I hope I can do everything that I promised in this video, and it might be that we just spend 30 minutes. I guarantee we'll spend at least 30 minutes on the camera just doing pearl sanding. When it starts making a different sound, you want to stop and assess what it's doing. Again, I'll kind of be surprised if anybody watching the video, or if like a great majority of the guys that are watching the video would actually be doing this. But you never know. There might be one or two people out there that actually are going to build the guitar. Okay, so now let's try and change gears a little bit and see what this little file does, because I've got some of the bulk off of that up there. Those two right there are a little bit high, so I want to focus on them and just make certain that there could be the possibility. No, it's straight as an arrow. I was probably just kind of scared to put much weight down here for fear of scratching that pearl. And the truth be known, all of these should have been done at once rather than just that one pearl. But I took that one pearl up to a fairly close to a finished state, so I could open the video with that. I don't know if the mother of pearl dust is dangerous to breathe, but I wouldn't snort it, that's for certain. So you might need to wear a respirator doing this, but I'm not creating any airborne dust here. Okay, let's stop and take a look at what we've got. Again, it's tempting to want to try to, you know, oh, sorry, I bumped the camera. It's probably tempting to want to wet it with a washcloth and kind of see how pretty it is, but just don't. Stay dark. Got a long ways to go. But and I'm probably going to pause the camera and go ahead and take these 4 down to a finish state, because this is probably going to take me about 30 minutes. And then I'll come back, and hopefully all these, I might come back in the middle, because see, I still got all my witness marks, but I've still got quite a ways to go. And this one right here, these two right here are looking like they're staying a little bit high. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to take my rasp, and I'm actually going to encourage those two. I'll do this on camera. I'm going to encourage those two right there to go ahead and drop down a little bit on the corner. One thing I've noticed about working with sandpaper, like on that block right there, the sandpaper will take the path of least resistance, and sometimes rather than it staying perfectly flat, it might end up following that contour. And then the sandpaper, especially if it's like a 220 or more coarse, man, it'll start scalloping. So always work with straight tools that will remain straight. That ought to make perfect sense. And see, as long as you've got your witness marks here, you'll be guaranteed not to get into your fretboard. And don't just draw those marks and not pay it. Don't zone out and start thinking about, you know, cutting the grass or something. Really keep your eye on those pencil marks under the location. Like right now, I'm kind of leaning up a little bit, and I'm just catching that one corner, but I'm really watching those witness marks right there. And if I see anything disappear, get off of it, because if you don't stay focused and you lose your attention, you'll be wearing a little dent into the fretboard, not even know it. And it's amazing, this tool right here, the rasp set, that's really close to the finished guitar. See, I'm seeing a little bit of the witness marks drop down right there, so I got to stay away from that area right there. Dangerous work, because if you're not paying attention, you'll take it too far. But even if you did scratch the fretboard a little bit, it's, you know, it'll be fine. But you don't want to scratch it and draw more witness marks and then scratch those and think, oh, it's okay, I'm just barely hitting. No, you've just hit your witness marks 3 different times, and that means you're actually changing the contour of the fretboard. So this is going to get boring really fast. So let me pause and do a whole lot of work under the magnifying glass, and then we'll see how I haven't introduced any scarring in the fretboard at all. Feeling good. All right, let me pause, do about 25 minutes worth of work. I'll come back with a cleaned up table, and we'll start having a fretboard come together. Okay, it's been about 25 minutes, if that. It's actually going really fast. And these are turning out really beautiful. Yeah, very nice. Very happy with that. Okay, so just kind of focused on these right here, and I kissed that one just a little bit, but I'm leaving these 4 up here for linear file work, where I'll work on those separately, and just stay away from the area down here. And what I did when I saw the witness marks begin to disappear a little bit, I just picked up some 220 and did some very, very gentle. I just wanted to feel the fretboard up under the paper and ask myself, I'm not pressing down at all right now. I'm just riding across the top, and I don't feel anything. That one's just a little bit. When I say high, no, it's not. You could just, you'll feel it. If one's a little bit high, actually you'll see it before you feel it. And the thing is, if you see that beautiful of a transition from your pearl to your wood, well, you're there, and there's no more sanding that needs to be done because you don't want to create any sort of dips at all. And again, I'm just doing this for demonstration purposes. Just go across it. And also, eventually you're going to get to the point where you're going to focus on each individual little pearl, and you're going to do a little bit of swirl sanding, just the pearl, just the pearl. That's a 220, very gentle pressure. And then eventually we're going to work that up to like a 1200 grit. And you could wet sand it if you wanted to, but don't let the fretboard get wet. Just you could sand it with some paper that's a little bit moist. See the brown dust right there? So I'm getting into the wood. But very quickly you'll have a guitar that would be acceptable to be a finished guitar, a finished fretboard. But if you wanted to continue to work it a little bit and really bring that pearl alive, you could actually use some jeweler's rouge and a Dremel and make it pretty. But the most important thing is to never use such an aggressive tool that you leave deep pitting. And if you do leave deep pitting, then just work it out in the pearl, and don't drop down the wood just to try to make up for it. And quite frankly, you might have to just accept it for a nasty scratch that once you get the strings on the guitar, you'll completely forget is there. And that's not the kind of work we want to do, but as long as you use little tools like this, you'll be able to very let me use the other file. See, this is a mill file. That's a crosscut file right there, and this is just a straight mill, I think they call it. No, it isn't called a mill bastard. I don't know why they call it that. But this being a straight cut, and you can see how that fretboard starts shining. Look how the rosewood starts getting buffed to a gloss, even with a file. That's crazy. That's pretty cool. And you can look at your file, and it has an equal amount of rosewood dust and the pearl. So you know now you're microscopically cutting off your fretboard surface, and that's when you want to stop. And just know that as far as this stage in the job, that's finished. It's very, very close to the actual guitar, because all I'll do is just kind of make sure that I clean out the grains a little bit later on, vacuum it, stuff like that. But let's transition into this top and start over. So you can see how within an hour to 2 hours of just very gentle file work, you got a finished fretboard. And if this were a traditional, oh my God, man, if this were a traditional Explorer where all you were doing were the dots, you'd be finished in 30 minutes, 20 minutes, and ready to tape your fretboard, which does not receive binding. So you can see how we spent all of our time setting up, doing the pearl, letting epoxy dry, waiting, then doing epoxy fill work, putty work. And after I did that putty work the other night, I let this set for, I think, 2 days and dry. Probably could have approached it the very next day, but I didn't want to run the risk of rushing it. So beautiful job, turning out very well. So all that time that we spent, building the first fretboard, not accepting it, transitioning to the second fretboard, then starting over. There's no sense in rushing this part, or there's no sense in rushing anything in the guitar build. I shouldn't have said it that way. Just don't rush it, because you'll end up spending a lot more time correcting a mistake than if you just try to bridle yourself and do the job slowly. So let's start over, and I'll do some clamp work back here. And basically, I'm just going to start in. Right here is, not sure if that's on the camera. Yeah, it is on the camera. I got that area right there pretty close to finish, so I don't want to run the risk of forgetting that pearl is about 99% finished. But this is exactly how I would have done it. I would have done this lower half up to like the 12th fret, and since there's a larger gap between the 9th and the 12th, or either the 12th and the 13th, you make your own decision where you want to start. I divide it into two sections and do the lower half and the upper half. This is exactly how I would have done it. I didn't just do that just for the camera purposes. But by allowing that epoxy to dry for a good 2 days, it's sanding just as dry as the wood. I mean the actual dry pearl. And once you get to the wood, once you start hitting the wood a little bit, but if you had have rushed that finish work time, you might have run into a situation where that epoxy was just a little bit gummy. Especially if you did it within 24 to 48 hours of doing the install. Because once you add that tint color to the epoxy, it will slow the cure time a little bit. I've noticed it's, even right now on the piece of paper where I did the epoxy work, it's not snap, crackle, popping just yet. It's still just, it'll break, but it's not snapping yet. So it's a kind of slow, dry process, but it is dry enough to do this work right here. Again, we got one that's pretty much flush right there. So if anything, we want to go ahead and do our witness marks, at least in the middle. I watched the last video where I actually installed, or one of the last videos where I actually installed the pearl, and I feel bad because I had my hand right in the way, and I thought the camera was on a better angle, so I didn't get to show when I was putting the epoxy into the actual mother of pearl slot. But it was kind of a self-explanatory operation, but I'm doing the best I can to try to keep my hand out of the way so you can see. Anything, it's kind of a given to just stay out of the middle and just work the sides off a little bit. Then move over to this side. And then actually stop and double check it, because this is pretty darn aggressive. Don't think that it's going to take 45 minutes of this right here. That pearl cuts very quickly, so keep a feel for it. Still a lot on the edges there. You'll just feel it. You'll feel it in the file when it stops, like dropping off the edge. Once you feel that it's actually kind of floating, you'll know. minutes. I don't know if I'll be able to do any tapering on this video. I'll do the best I can. But so the next thing that I would be doing is once I get the fretboard, you know, like I've got the higher register pearl, is anticipate the taper work, which if I'm going to see, Ed gave me his dimensions, the nut is going to be 43.53 wide, which is 1 in 23/32. Well, I'm going to round that up 1/32 to 1 in 24/32. I'm talking about the nut width. And what is 1 in 24/32? That's 1 in 3/4. I'm working with a binding that is 1/16 of an inch wide on both sides. So that's 1/8 of an inch. So I'll be finding the center, and then I'll be machining this wood down to 1 5/8 inch nut width. Okay, so and then once you add the 1/16 of an inch binding here and the 1/16 of an inch binding there, you're a 1 3/4 inch finished outside of binding to binding a nut location. And then by the time you do your sanding and your rolling, you've got 1/32 of an inch that you're able to shape off on the roll. But since we're doing a rolled fretboard viewed from the front, it's going to look thinner from the front and more vintage correct. It's not going to look like the modern fretboard that's real fretboard binding heavy. It's not going to be a real wide binding. The thickness will be there, but you won't see it because it's buried within the rolled fretboard work. Okay, so if anything, I'll at least talk about that a little bit at the end of the video. But if I don't, that would be your next operation where you're anticipating roughly around the 19th fret location to be about 2 3/16 of an inch. And then you're going to be deducting off 1/8 of an inch up there from the center, and then you're just going to be tapering your fretboard. And you could taper your fretboard simply by using a straight board like this, you know, and drawing the line, the pencil line on the back of your fretboard, you know, and then the pencil line would be on a taper, and then you could reattach your rosewood fretboard or ebony fretboard to this straight board here. But along the line, I'm kind of getting ahead of myself a little bit, but I just think it's very important because you can read between the lines. Basically, it would be, and the fretboard would, this top part of the fretboard would be overhanging a little bit like that, and then all you got to do is simply put it on your table saw and run the whole fretboard down the table saw, where the table saw blade is just barely not kissing your piece of poplar, and then it will shave off the taper, and then you remove the fretboard, reattach it with the other side, and then let it overhang on that taper and run it down the table saw, and then you've got a tapered fretboard just by using a straight piece of poplar, a little bit of CA glue, medium strength, and a little bit of ingenuity. But I'll try to talk about that in this video in more detail. But it kind of feels like we're probably already at 45 minutes, 43, 44 minutes. It's just a ton of work, and I want to stay focused on this operation in this video. In the event I don't get to talk about that, and then when you come back to video 18, I probably will already have the fretboard tapered, and then I'll do some binding, gluing, and stuff like that. Okay, getting real close. A little bit high in that corner right there. Let's see if I can use the file to drop it down. Flat bottom. I should have already done this, but I'll do just a little bit of it. A little bit higher right there even. I can actually still see epoxy right there. So we're not getting into our fretboard yet. You can still see epoxy right there. It was great down the middle. A lot of epoxy around that one. I think the solution here would be to go ahead and transition into the real aggressive cross-cut small file, and then I'm going to flip this around. Doesn't matter, you know, which side I work it from. Well, I guess I could show it to you a little bit. See how you might see that. There's a little bit of epoxy right there ghosting. A little bit. Actually, on all of them, all the sides, but the middle's pretty close. It's actually very close. So what I'll be doing is taking the crosscut file and staying very much, not even turning this file, just keeping it very straight. And right now I'm just watching the epoxy. Pin it to your table. That's one less thing you have to fight. And you definitely, as soon as I hit that, I definitely can feel it cutting pearl. It's got that real scratchy, sandy feel to it. But once you feel it kind of smooth out, you know you're beginning to float across the wood. I think I left this one a little bit high because I was trying to stay away from that location down there. Let me put a little finger pressure just on that one spot. The cool thing about the timeline and the point we're at the job right now, we're way past the we're way over the hump now. That was probably the most difficult part of a whole guitar build, is getting the pearl in there. And then we know how to do our sanding, or how not to sand. In other words, don't use sandpaper until you're just kind of doing feather work. And just use your rasp and your files, and it'd be hard to mess it up from here on out. So let me pause and spend about 15 or 20 minutes getting that real nice and pretty, so I don't run the risk of screwing something up, and then we'll go from there. Okay, it's going a lot faster than I thought, but at this point where you can still see just a little bit of the staining, where the tinted epoxy is embedded in the top of the rosewood. That's where I've got my 220, and I want to be able to feel what it is I'm sanding. I'm not going to try to sand the whole thing like this, because I'll lose contact with the areas that I'm trying to level. And the only areas that I'm trying to blend and level will be the perimeter of each pearl. So what I'm going to do is just get in that one little location right there, and I'm going to sand till I see some of the rosewood dust, and then I'm going to get away from it. I'm staying straight with the grain. Doesn't really need much on the top, and I don't really think it needs any on this side. It looks like that middle's a little bit high. So, and now leave them alone. Go to the next one. And you would have wanted to just feel that you're real close, because this would get you in a lot of trouble if you weren't really pretty much already there, because of the overhang, the path of least resistance, the sandpaper would start wallowing out. And I see that middle's a little bit high because I saw it catching some pearl dust. So we can get away from it. Just the perimeter. I'm just trying to make that stained epoxy disappear. There's no way to show that because I can't really do it left-handed very effectively. So I'm really pressing into that pearl. And blend them together a little. One thing that kind of surprised me, this Madagascar rosewood is sanding very, very quickly. It's not nearly as, I thought it was going to be a lot more difficult to sand, or a little bit more difficult to sand, but it's not. So with that said, you got to be really careful, because you'll get into the profile very quickly. But what I feel right there is an incredible job. I can still see a little bit of a, but be careful, it might just be discoloring in the rosewood. I think that's what that is. It looks like there's still some epoxy right there, but I don't think so. And also by the time it gets moistened a little bit, it'll come alive. So let's see what we've got here. One thing about tape, sometimes it has a tendency to leave a little bit of a film there. So let me get the table cleaned up a little bit. I'll probably be ending the video within 10 minutes or so. I always say that, and it's 20, 30 minutes go by. But no sense in having a bunch of crap in the background that you don't need. Close enough. All right, now what you want to do is isolate your eye and only look at the rosewood. Look for mistakes. You want to look for scratches or scars that somehow or another got introduced. But if you did a good job and kept everything linear, you won't have that. Now focus on looking at the pearl. And are there any gaps between the pearl and the rosewood? And if there are any gaps, is it enough to worry about? When I'm talking about gaps, I'm talking about just like really superficial hairline. Uh-oh. I don't see anything. So now that you've looked at so there's a little superficial hairline separation right there, but no different on any custom guitar I've ever seen, or any even some guitars, they're going to have a little, And when I'm saying separation, I'm literally talking about it just didn't get any epoxy put in there. Didn't need it. Because once I wet this fretboard and the wood swells a little bit, then I straighten out the grain again and then sand it up to 1200 grit and then, buff it a little bit. Man, it's going to be beautiful. This is one of the most beautiful fretboards I've ever done as far as the actual rosewood itself. And the pearl work's not bad either. Very happy with that. Look down the center line and ask yourself if any of them got off. And I don't see anything as far as, straight line centering. They look really good. So with that said, check time. 55 minutes. That would actually be an awesome video to just end right there. But rather than trying to do any work, what I want to do, I want to talk about that taper work a little bit more in detail. So if you're going to do a guitar that has binding, I like using the 60 thousandths binding. And it's just really beautiful. It's really tasteful. And it's very safe. If you want to leave all that thickness in there, not round very much, it's just just a stunning binding, and it looks really good with the body as well because that's what's on the body. And also, being a 16th of an inch or 60 thousandths, that's very easy math. But if you get into the world of like the Robert Benedettos, where you're going to start doing like a white, black, white 10 thousandths, and then you're going to finalize out here at this dimension, you're kind of on your own there. I've never liked doing that type binding because I'm more so about tone, and you get tone from wood. The more wood you have, the better tone you're going to have. There's nothing wrong with doing a little bit of binding. It's not going to change the tonal aspects. But if you start stepping in here doing a 1/4 of an inch binding, well, then you had to cut off an additional 1/2 of an inch of your fretboard, because you did a 1/4 of an inch bite on each side, and you ate up a lot of your fretboard. And then also you've got to be dealing with the fact that the fret is going to have the tang notched really deep, and it can be done. I mean, I saw Benedetto do it in his video series, and I've played one of his guitars once at Up It Grew, and was a guitar that was from the 90s, and it was phenomenal. Played like a dream. But nonetheless, that's just an enormous amount of work. It's not really necessary. However, even on Ed's guitar here, I do not do fret nibs or binding nibs or whatever you want to call them. I don't do nibs on the end where you go ahead and install these frets. Once this is tapered, then you go ahead and install the frets and just cut them straight, and then the binding goes up against that fret, and then you scrape around that. I hate that. And none of the to my knowledge, none of like the 40s or 50s like jazz guitars were done that way. They actually notched the tang just a little. But see the way, let me take that back. I don't want it to sound like I'm throwing Benedetto under the bus. What he did, if he was going to do all the black, white, black, white, black, white, black, and then finish with the perimeter, he would go ahead and install all of the micro fine lines, and then he would take his fret saw, and then he would saw through all that buildup. But he still lost all that wood, from where he built it up with the plastic or the ABS. And then all he did was he put the solid piece of binding on the very outside. Therefore, the fret traveled through the black, white, black, white, black, or however much laminate he might have done, and then it only got notched right out there on the end. So I just want to make certain that I clarify that, because I really did make a mistake the way I explained that you're having to notch off a 1/4 of an inch. That's not the way it would be done, and that was a mistake in the way I explained that. I hope I don't lose anybody there, but if you are going to do binding, I think Stuart McDonald has some videos on how to actually do binding, and they probably cover that stuff. But just know that only notch for what you have to. But if in Ed's case, in this guitar right here, we're doing 60 thousandths of the binding, and not only that, but the binding is going on the top is going to be rolled probably down to like 25 thousandths or 30 thousandths. So the little bit of notch that's going to be now when I'm installing them, the fret will be hanging over about an eighth of an inch, and there'll be an enormous notch. But then once everything gets trued with the fretboard, it gets filed down to the point to where the little bit of a notch that's on that fretboard is so minimal that from a tonal standpoint or the risk of that bending or something like that, it's not going to happen. So, and that's one of those things that as I'm doing those processes, I was like, man, I wish I could do a video and talk about that. But if I'm doing all my fret work, I want to stay focused on fret work. I don't want to do videos when I'm trying to do that type of stuff. But I did want to just at least talk about it from a general perspective. But I like the 60 thousandths binding recap because it's a 16th of an inch on the bass side and a 16th of an inch on the treble side. That equates to an eighth of an inch. Is that right? Yeah, an eighth of an inch. And then if I'm real close to a 1 3/4 inch wide nut, which I am, I'm 1 in 23/32 for Ed's guitar, and these are numbers Ed gave me. So then that's what I meant by now it's easy. I'm just working from 1 3/4 minus 1/8, and which is 1 5/8, and then a half of 1 5/8 is 1 13/16. Or you could look at it like this from a mathematical standpoint. If I have a 1 5/8 inch nut width, I need a half of the 1, and then I need to add a half of the 5/8. So let me make sure I recap that, just kind of follow along. If it's 1 5/8 across here, and I'm wanting to just do some quick math, well, a half of 1 inch is 1/2 of an inch. So let's put that half inch up here, and then there's 5/8 of an inch left over. A half of 5/8 is 5/16. Add the 5/16 to the 1/2 inch, and we get 1 13/16. And then you can take the 1 13/16 if you want and divide it in half, whatever that number is. But the simple thing is to just no, I'm sorry, that is the number we're looking for. Then once you have that 13/16, once you have the 13/16, then just come over from the center of your drawing, your mark on the back of the center of the fretboard, because now you're working everything from the back. And then on the back of that fretboard, you're simply coming off the center. Let's say the center mark is right here. Then you're just going to measure over 13/16 and make a mark here, a very fine mark here. And you're going to measure from the center over, make the mark, and then simply do the same thing up here at the 19th fret. However, now we're 1 13/16. I'm sorry, we're 2 3/16 inch is the traditional width, minus a 1/16 of an inch on each side. Split that in half, and then go from there. And then just draw a pencil line. Draw a real fine, accurate pencil line, and then that's what I meant by then just temporarily glue it atop this straight board, and then just run it down the table saw. It's real simple, and there's no sense in me physically showing you how to do that because you really should just be able to listen to what I'm talking about. And you might determine to do it a different way. You might determine, well, okay, I'm going to do that, but rather than cutting it on the table saw, I'm now going to rather than use the table saw, now I'm just going to put it on my router table. And let's say this was overhanging by like 1/4 of an inch and just overhanging about a 1/16 of an inch down here. Well, then maybe I'm going to just take and ease off some material off the bottom there and just push it along my router table, and then raise this on up, and then make that final pass with a push cut, just a real clean push cut, and then then you created your taper atop a router table, and that's typically how it would be done. But I do like using the table saw because I've got a really nice fine blade and I trust it. But if there's anything that's going to get you in trouble, the table saw could do some tear out. So be careful. It's a pretty big kerf that you're cutting out of sometimes a very, very dry, brittle wood, and it could get you in trouble. So which one's safest? I don't know. Probably the router table. Probably the router table. But it's just, see, there's such an enormous mass up here that's hanging off. And I mean, there's a substantial amount. You're literally taking off about 3/8 of an inch. I don't want to come in and start going, buzzing off 3/8 of an inch for fear there's going to be some sort of fissure in here, and it might literally split the whole fretboard. I've never had that happen. I'm not trying to be dramatic, but sometimes router bits will get you in trouble, especially if you just the slightest little bit of tilt, and you'll screw up. Whereas if I'm working on a table saw, man, I'm able to really, pick your own tool. But just read between the line, whatever you're comfortable working with. There's no shame in possibly coming up to the table saw and cutting it off within 1/8 of an inch, kind of wide, because you can set that fence back to where your table saw blade is only cutting out here, and then maybe route the rest off. Just however you're comfortable working, but just don't spend week after week after week of getting to this point only to screw it up there in the last in one wrong cut. Okay, so I'll leave it at that and then call it a video. Glad I got to just talk about that, and that I'll shoot straight with that. Took a lot of stress off of me because I want to make certain that I've got this really finished before I do my taper work. And if I had have attempted to finish the taper work on camera, I would have had the time of explaining what I was doing, and then run the risk of doing exactly what I just said, doing some risk and tear out or something like that. So this way I can really slow down and not mess up Ed's guitar. But let's see what it looks like. No, I wish I could. I would love to wipe it with some mineral spirits just to really see it pop, but I don't want any sort of gumminess there. I like that wood. It's nice and dry right now. And what does it feel like right now? It feels like an absolutely 100% finished guitar. Feels incredible. But is it finished? Nah, it's got a long way to go. Because once I start doing some of my... Oh, no, that's the wrong paper. Once I start doing my 220 and 400 here, kind of just... and this is what's tempting also. I'm glad I thought of this. Don't go ahead and try to finish the fretboard. Even though you think you're at a finish point, you're not. Because after I do my binding, see the binding, yeah, I should have continued to talk about it. The binding is going to be glued on with the Stewart McDonald binding cement, and there's going to be a little bit of glue that gets in each fret slot. That's where you're going to have to come in here, and you're going to be, the binding's going to be on here, sticking up really high, really nasty, and it's going to be mummified where you've got everything taped together. But then you're going to have to clean out each of those slots right there in order to receive the fret. So there's still a lot of meticulous handwork to do, but I'd rather have a little bit too much glue and it be squeezing out in each one of the little fret slots rather than trying to be chintzy on the glue, and then that glue run the risk of that binding run the risk of not making a good contact. And you do need to wipe that with some acetone to get the oils out of it before you do your binding. And then after I do the binding work, then I'll show you my trick about how to make certain that, this will have to be removed from this board, obviously, to do the taper work. And then I'll just be handling a fretboard. I'll just be handling a fretboard like this right here. But in order to guarantee that my binding truly flushes out with the bottom here before I glue it down to the neck lower, I will be taping some construction paper on the bottom here. And when I'm working atop a flat surface just like that, doing the binding will be overhanging a little bit on the bottom, and then it will be getting scraped flush with the bottom just once. And as soon as you see your scraper remove just a little bit of the rosewood, then you know you're perfectly flush with the bottom, and she's ready to glue down to your neck lower. This is some tricky work, because if you miss that, on a guitar that is clear coated, then that's going to be noticeable, and that's a difficult repair. But then once it's well, I just got to stop because I'm not there yet. There's still a lot of work to do in order to get that binding. See, the binding, once the binding gets trimmed with the top of the fretboard, that fretboard is radiused, so the binding has got to be sanded, scraped, cut real clean, radiused with the fretboard as well. And especially if the binding's really wide, that's some very tricky work. So anyway, there's just a lot of handwork still to do. It's one of those things that's really rewarding, very time consuming, but exactly what I just said. It's a very rewarding process to build your own fretboard. But man, I would not, if you're building a guitar and this is your first or second guitar, man, build a build a Telecaster, and put a dot fretboard on there, and you'll be so much happier, because it took me a long time to get to the point where I could do pearl work and not, you know, not lose my cool, because it's and that might just be that I was younger when I was doing that. I was kind of a temperamental person. I wasn't real cool headed. I'd go from zero to pissed off really bad really fast with a situation like that. So you don't want that to happen. Try to keep her cool and build a nice guitar. And I hope that was some good information. I appreciate you guys dropping in. It's going to go pretty fast from here on out because we're definitely over the hurdle with that part. But the videos will come fairly quickly, probably every 2 to 3 days now. And very quickly, it'll be turning into a guitar. And hopefully we can get it shipped to Ed within probably about 4 to 5 weeks. That's probably what I'm shooting for right now. So Ed, I appreciate your patience, and I appreciate you guys dropping in, as I always say. And I'm looking around, so I'll see you guys in the next video.